I remember my earliest memories standing next to her while she worshiped God. And it was very real and very different for me. And it's a precious memory that I hold of her worshiping her God.
Well, welcome back to Train Them Up podcast, the podcast where our goal is to help you as parents or grandparents or mentors for young people and to help them become disciples of Jesus. So this is, it's been a lot of fun. We are on episode 4 today.
If this is your first time joining us, we want to welcome you. So my name is Zach. I'm a children's pastor.
And my name is Calvin, and I am a youth pastor. And today we have some guests with us. So welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
Why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Your names, who you are, what you do, all of that.
I'm Kim. This is my lovely wife, Marissa.
We've been married 38 years. We've raised 5 kids, and we are empty nesters.
We have 12 grandchildren in varying degrees of development between in utero to 10 years of age.
Do you serve at a church or anything like that? Do you help out in any way?
Yes, I serve on the production team currently. And
I'm on the worship team.
Were you both raised Christian, or was it something, did you find your faith on your own at some point later on in life?
I was not raised in a Christian home. My mother was a Christian, but it was forbidden for her to share her faith with her children. My father was an abusive alcoholic, and life was hard at home. And I found my faith at Vacation Bible School when I was in the 4th grade.
Oh, wow. VBS. Hey, you're doing a VBS soon.
Yeah, it's exciting. That's cool.
I was raised in a home that was unequally yoked as well. My mom was a Christian and my dad was not. But I was next door to a church, and so I was raised actually in a church, but not really in a Christian home. And I found the Lord at an early age, preteen, and I attended that church, and I learned most of my development as a Christian was in that church, and even though we weren't really necessarily required to go, we went. I was there when the church was open. I was usually there.
When you both became parents, did you have to kind of learn stuff on your own, or were you able to take some things from when you were kids and apply them? Good things, bad things. What did you have to unlearn, relearn?
My father mostly patterned for me what I absolutely did not want for my kids and my family. So I knew that much, but I didn't know how to do it right. And I had the moment when we had our first child, and I remember reacting in anger at something she did and just getting the slap in the face. It's like, this is exactly how he parented, in anger and just irrational. It brought me to my knees and made me realize I can't do this. I don't know how to do this, but God does. And from that moment on, it was like, Lord, you need to show me how to parent this child today and every day. And that was how we parented every single day, every moment with this issue, with this child. Show me today, show me now, show me this minute how to do this.
Parenting is very humbling.
Yes.
My parents were both very good parents, and I was kind of raised in a kind of an ideal home. Really, I didn't realize how good I had it. I guess like most kids who have a good home, they just don't realize what it's like out in other places. What we really needed to know about parenting was the spiritual stuff, and we were not modeled that in our growing up lives, but I was modeled it I told you I spent a lot of time in the church, and there were good examples of spirituality there. There were good spiritual leaders there. They weren't necessarily parenting me, but there were some good examples in my life.
Mentors play a big role in people's lives as they're growing up, and we're big advocates for that as well. Not just parents, but those people that come alongside and set those examples elsewhere. Like if there's not an example at home, we got to show them examples in some other way. So that's good that you had those in your life. So you both mentioned that you've got some involvement in just like production. It's like lights, lyrics up on the screen in church. You're more of the musical piece in the worship setting. When did you pick up music? Was it like a natural thing for you, or was it something you learned along the way?
I was kind of a natural singer, I guess, and so I was involved in worship in church always, and it was always a part of my life that I can remember. My relationship with the Lord and my learning of music, instruments and such, kind of developed along a similar, parallel lines. When I was an adult, really, I was, by that time, I had become quite aware of that music is the language of the soul, and that people who wrote music whose souls were worldly wrote worldly music, and even at best, it did not minister to the soul like God's music and worship does. And so it kind of became just a worship musician as an adult. And I guess I've always been involved in my whole adult life. I've been involved in worship teams and worship leadership, and this worship has always been a big part of our lives.
Yeah, and because all of our children were musical, they either sang or they played an instrument or both.
All of them?
All of them.
Wow, that's cool.
And we served together, and I was asked not to sing. And I can't play an instrument, but I could do the soundboard. I could do all this other stuff, so I became the production person.
Yeah. I always say that is just as important as any other instrument. Like, controlling the lyrics that go on a screen is an instrument, so to speak. It's like you're raising a banner for the Lord when you put up the lyrics, because you're leading the people in what to sing next. If you don't hit that next button, most people are going to be lost, because most people don't memorize the lyrics. And so it's like, if you don't hit your string, your key, then you're not leading them well, right? So it's still an instrument for you. So you're still a musician in a sense. I always encourage people on that. You're raising a banner for the Lord when you put up lyrics on the screen. So there you go. You're a musician. Which that's really cool, because the whole premise of the episode today, we are talking about worship watchers. No, not Weight Watchers. We're talking about worship watchers. And the idea comes from just how when kids look up to their parents, whatever kind of parent they have, they're watching. They're watching what their parents do. And I wanted to talk specifically about worship aspect of what do our kids see us worshiping, because we all worship something, whatever it may be. Some people worship other gods. Some people worship just idols in general in their life. Some people worship their job or their finances, whatever it be. And so what do our kids see us worshiping? And there's a lot of kids that are seeing some good things, and there's a lot of kids that are seeing some bad things that their parents are doing. So it's really the whole premise of it, and music worship specifically. So yeah, I
think it's pivotal for me. Growing up in a home where Christ wasn't allowed. I mean, I'm just saying that with the quotes. Not that he wasn't there. Obviously, he was there. I can see looking back. But when my mother was allowed to take us to church, we weren't allowed to go to Sunday school or youth group or do anything like that. But I remember my earliest memories standing next to her while she worshiped God. And it was very real and very different for me. And it's a precious memory that I hold of her worshiping her God. So when we were raising our kids, that was very important to me, that our kids learn to worship. And so we trained them, to actually physically do this. When you're in the sanctuary, you're standing in respect. You're standing. You're not slouching or sleeping or doing whatever. No, you're standing and you're worshiping, and you're engaged, and you're going to worship my God, even if he's not your God yet. And I felt like that was really important to us. So we didn't scoot them out the room to go to a different room. They stayed with us, and they worshiped with us when they were little, until they were all old enough for us to start serving together, whether that be in kids' church or youth groups later, as we were youth leaders.
So I've always appreciated at our church, I don't know if many churches do this, but I've always appreciated how in Zach's ministry, kids ministry at our church, they don't just keep the kids in a back room to do their own thing. During worship, we bring the kids in, and they have their own space in the worship room, and they oftentimes are watching, like you were mentioning to me before, like kids are like looking back.
I can't count the amount of time. And it seems to be especially like a boys thing. Like boys will be in the first and second graders will be in the front row, and sometimes they're not even watching what's going on the stage. They're looking behind them because we're right in the front. They're looking behind them to see what their dad or their mom is doing. And I think it's really important to bring those kids out there to worship, just for the same reasons you were saying, because we want to train them in the ways that we want them to worship, right? We want them to worship the Lord full-heartedly. And so I always thought it was really important to bring those kids out there. And it's also like a twofold thing. So you bring those kids out to the front row. I think it brings life to the church. Some people, they come to our church on Sunday. I don't even know if they know that there's a kids ministry on the other side of the building, upstairs or downstairs. So they see this train of kids coming through, and then you see a 6-year-old in the front row raising their hands and Waymaker, you know what I mean? Like, it just brings life to the church. So yeah, I'm really passionate about that, bringing those kids out there to worship the Lord. So yeah.
And I always say this to Zach, like, because I lead at one of our campuses at our church often with guitar and singing, but I always tell Zach's one of my favorite worship leaders because he brings those kids out and he's standing there, he's lifting his hands and he's singing along, and those kids are looking at him because they might not have people at home that are showing them what worship looks like. And so I just appreciate it. He's guiding the room when he's raising his hands or he's clapping and all of that. And I also heard this other story from somebody in our church that I wanted to share. I won't say names, but we were talking about kneeling specifically in worship at our church during one of our worship sessions, just the importance of it, and not making it weird or anything like that, but just thinking about who God is and how holy and righteous and royal he is. And it's only right when you're before a king to kneel before a king. And so we were talking about that concept of when we come to a place of worship, do we take times to kneel before? So we were encouraging our church in that. And one of the people in our church, they were saying how they almost felt weird about that we were talking about it, and they were kind of hesitant, like they didn't want to kneel. And because we just talked about it, and now they're like, well, no, I don't really want to kneel because they felt like they're being told to do it. And then, so the song continued on, and they looked to the front of the worship room where the kids sit and worship, and they saw their son kneeling down, worshiping with their hands raised. And they were just like, now my kid's showing me how to worship. And so it was just, I remember that, and I really appreciated that they shared that with me, because it just kind of changed the heart of that parent to just be conscious about what their body is doing in worship, raising hands, kneeling down.
And that kind of leads into what I wanted to read here. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 18 and 19 says, "Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord." And that verse, you and I were talking about it, that verse really just says, hey, this is a command from Paul. Like, even if you don't want to sing, even if you don't want to raise your hands, even if you don't want to clap, do it. Like, that's what you're commanded to do here. Like, get over yourself, you know?
Yeah, because that's like, I hear a lot of people, a lot of guys mostly, 'cause I don't know why it's guys, but I feel like most women are naturally inclined to just have a heart that makes melodies. But like, it's the guys that have their hands in their pockets during worship. I don't see a lot of women with their hands in their pockets during worship.
We don't have good pockets.
That's true. But I always see guys with their hands in their pockets, and I see it when I'm at the front of the congregation when I'm singing and leading, and I see it in the back when I'm not leading, and I'm either in the front or in the back. I don't like to be in the middle. And so when I'm in the back of the church, I see it. I see guys with their hands in their pockets, and it just makes me so frustrated. I don't approach them and be like, "What are you doing?" But I see it. It burdens my heart. And the biggest excuse I feel like for most people is like, "Well, I just don't sing." You're a prime example. If you can't sing, then do something else to praise God. Put up lyrics on the screen. If you can't sing, then tap your foot. If you can't tap on beat, then raise your hands. Like
you can sing in our sanctuary. No one's going to hear you.
Yeah,
it's nice and loud.
That's what I'm counting
Sing. Yes.
Yeah, it says sing, but make melody in your heart. So as long as your heart is in tune, it doesn't matter how off key your voice is, right?
I don't know if you remember, but last week Janelle mentioned being intentional about our parenting. And I think that it kind of resonates with what you're saying about in our worship. We need to be intentional about it. And in fact, well, Zach makes a good point when he said jokingly, get over yourself. But the truth is, we're self-conscious. How often are we, truly worshiping in spirit and worshiping in truth? Quite often, we get caught up in self-centeredness. Oh, someone's going to hear me singing, or maybe we don't raise our hands here, or maybe this isn't the right time to be clapping, or something like that. We don't really let ourselves be led by the Spirit quite often, and we do need to go over ourselves. It's not about us. Our worship should be about who we're worshiping.
Music itself isn't worship, because you can sing any kind of song. You can sing a love song and all of that, but as far as worshiping our God, music plays a big role in that. Just like we read in Ephesians, we're commanded to sing, to make melodies. There's other scriptures that says, clap your hands, rivers, clap your hands, people, shout for joy, lift up a sound of praise. And so there's so many scriptures that are telling us to sing, shout, clap, praise, all of these things. And as parents, like you guys were explaining with your kids, and we are with our kids, it's our job to pass on that baton of praise. We're showing them this is how we worship our God. And even if, like you said, it's not your God yet, I'm still going to show you how to worship him. So hopefully one day when they get to that place, when they meet him and they invite him in, they already know how to do those things. Because there's a lot of people, once they get saved, they don't know how to pray. There's so many adults that are like, I don't know how to pray out loud. I just kind of pray in my heart, or I don't really know how to sing or do all those things. And so it's our responsibility, just like it is in a race, in a marathon race. You have that baton and you've got to hand it off to the next generation. And that's our responsibility as Christians and as parents. And Psalm 145 verse 4 says, one generation shall praise your works to another, and they shall declare your mighty acts. And the word praise there, it's the idea of like an echoing sound. It's loud. And are we praising? It doesn't not just like, but it's almost like echoing to the next generation, is what we do, echoing into the hearts of our kids. As you said, when you saw your mother worshiping, it was like seared into your brain, that moment of her hands raised in a true heart of what it looks like.
I still hear her voice, and I was probably 4. That was a long time ago.
I have many memories of my father where not necessarily singing, maybe some later memories, but some of my earlier memories of my dad were him praying, and those things, it's like they're so seared into my brain. Like I can't remember the sounds, but I can remember just like the feeling of just like that comfort and peace when I would see my dad pray. And those things are just like burnt into my brain. So
I know my daughter Serenity, she's got a memory like none other. Like she can remember everything, and it's sometimes spooky. But I remember because we adopted her, and when she come to us, she was 2. I remember when she was real young, my wife Jill and I, Serenity and Thomas, we were in the worship room at our church, and I remember holding Serenity, and I'm just like singing at the top of my lungs with one hand raised and Serenity in this hand here. And I remember opening my eyes, and she's just here, like staring at me, like kind of like, what's wrong with this guy? But at the same time, I hope that is something like that she does remember, because she does remember everything. I hope that's something that she remembers and is like, man, my dad, he didn't do everything right, but he loved the Lord and he would worship him. He didn't care who was watching, Yeah. So
I wanted to talk a little bit now, just like giving some people some practical ways. If they're not musical, if they're not on a worship team, if they're not on some sort of place where they are doing that consistently in the church, what are some other ways that parents can practically show their kids how to worship? And I just wanted to talk about some like different ideas, like how can you practically show your kids if you can't get to church, or if you can't do this, like how to
worship in song?
Yeah,
song
worship.
or-
Yes,
or
worship in song.
other
Yeah.
forms of worship?
No, yeah, in song specifically, I guess. Yeah.
You're the musical one.
You're the one that spent all the time with them.
Cut. Beep. No.
Yeah, he would come home and the kid would go, Daddy, can we do whatever? And he'd look at me and goes, what are the rules? I don't know what's happening. What's happening?
One thing I think that Zach and I have talked about a lot was a trip we went on in Kentucky with some youths. And when we were there, every time we would travel, we would crank up the music and we were like listening to worship songs. And it was like, we turned a minivan into the house of the Lord. And I think that's a very easy way to show kids how to worship, just how to sing praises to God in the car.
I don't know if we ever showed them stuff like that. I mean, we sang in the car all the time. But as they got older, when they were teenagers, we had a keyboard in the living room and guitars, and they would have their friends over because we were very particular of where our kids went. So it was just easier to have everyone come to our house. And then they would have worship. Song would always happen, and everyone would grab an instrument, and it was just beautiful to watch our teenagers worshiping in the living room, impromptu. That happened all the time. Or if they were washing dishes, they would also.
Well, we had age-appropriate media, like whether it was VeggieTales or, I mean, I don't know who all had made
VeggieTales.
music, but I mean, the kids as adults still remember all the, childhood songs that they sang. And there's a lot of media. I don't know what people who they're not musically inclined, I don't know what they gravitate towards. So I guess they have to manufacture something, or it has to come from some source. But I guess we're supposed to make music anyway, according to the scripture that Zach read.
Did you guys, with your kids, I'm just curious if this was a thing when you were raising them, did you guys ever listen to Hide 'Em in Your Heart? Is that a thing?
Never heard of it.
No? Okay. Hide 'Em in the Heart is something I grew up listening to. I know some of your kids are like around my age, so but yeah, Hide 'Em in Your Heart was back when it was on tape, cassette tape, and then they moved on to CDs. But they were actual Bible verses that they just turned into songs. They didn't add extra lyrics. They would just sing Bible verses. And
We had some VHS tapes that were kids' worship songs that they wore out because we played them.
Something along that line.
When the first grandkids came, I'd plug that thing in and they'd love it too. And our oldest son is like, that thing's still kicking around.
you'd be surprised, like some of those songs, like there's one particular that always pops into my mind, and it's when I am afraid, I will trust in him. And it's the whole idea of like, cast your anxieties upon him, for he cares for you, that verse. And it's that the song is all of that. And so whenever I'm feeling that way, when I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling overwhelmed, I literally recall that song to mind. And I'm just like, when I am afraid, I will trust in him. And I listened to those songs when I was 3, and now I'm 27. And I'm still, when I'm feeling afraid or anxious, I'm still recalling those things. And so if you're listening and you're watching and you're listening to like Cocomelon or these other like kids program songs, just what if you replaced those things with songs that are just Bible verses put to melody? YouTube has a bunch of Christian songs for your kids. There's a lot of good apps out there.
We had the NIV Kids Club.
Yeah.
Singing the Bible and having fun.
Yes. Singing the Bible and having fun.
See, you could sing it better than me.
Sorry,
I don't know.
You want to try it, Zach?
No, thanks. Another good resource that our kids love is Saddleback Kids. They've got endless worship videos that are the same thing that you're talking about. Just they take a verse and they just put a little melody behind it and sing it over and over and over, and it's great because sometimes my daughter can recite some of those just from hearing those songs. So
that's how they teach you to memorize the ABCs to a melody. Right. Melodies help us recall things to mind, and so I think the some of the writers of the Bible, people like Paul and some of the psalmists, they knew that melody helps us recall things to mind when it comes to things of God, and helps us remember who he is in situations where it feels like he's not around. When we're in the valley of the shadow of death, recalling, no, he is right there with me with his shepherd's staff guiding me. And so we can put melodies to those and help us. So one final thought as we close out is, as empty nesters, all of your kids are gone in their own homes or in different states. Some of them are married. All of them are married?
They're all here except Isaac, who's in Hawaii.
Oh, so okay. Only one of them is in another state. But yeah, so what is it like now to see them all and they're still worshiping God? They're still singing songs. What is that like as a parent now to see them grown up and still loving the Lord?
That's our whole goal as parents. There's nothing that comes close to that as a goal for us, a priority in our lives. And so it's the most rewarding thing. I mean, we're just overwhelmed by it all the time. And parenting all along has been, a tremendously humbling experience at every step, as I'm sure that you guys are experiencing at this stage of your parenting, that it's so humbling to be at this point and to be so blessed and to be able to experience that on a regular basis, because we get together all the time with them. And it's just a tremendous blessing to us.
It's very humbling, as I believe the Lord chose that for me. It was nothing that we did. It was all him, what he did. And it is very humbling. And we are very, very blessed.
I would love to be in like a household of like all of your kids playing instruments together. It'd be like a big family worship band. I don't think I've ever like been around your whole family together at once. I've met, I think, most of your family.
We have family dinner every Tuesday night.
All right, I'm coming over. What time?
I just had another question too. We've talked about how you guys are empty nesters and you've got these grandkids. How would you say that your role has changed in, you were parents and now you have grandkids, but there's still a level of responsibility there, would you say?
Oh yeah. It's always our first day for whatever experience it is that we're meeting. And now we've got, this is our first 10-year-old grandchild. And this is the first time this 2-year-old has spent the night with us, or this is, whatever is at hand. We have to be, we're supposed to be prepared for. We're supposed to not just get there and be winging it. We're supposed to be preparing. Today is the day that we prepare for tomorrow, right? So I can't say that I've done most things right, but there's been a lot of grace for me. And so we keep walking by faith, right?
It's a lot of fun because we can
It's a lot of fun.
We actually have more time to be even more intentional because we're not doing the tasks. When I get them, I get to just sit and play, and we get to have conversations and go for walks and do fun things the whole time. And when they're tired, Mom takes them, So it's fun. It's different, but it's fun.
My boys I said my boys, I have a daughter as well, but she can't speak yet. But when my boys, they take a lot of time with their grandparents. Ever said something really funny a couple of weeks ago. He was like, I just love Grammy and Grampy, and I don't want a new Grammy and Grampy. I'm like, well, that was never an option. But yeah, and
you're in luck.
They love the Lord, and they're always singing with them and praising God when they're at their house, and so they have good examples too. So even as a grandparent, your job still is not done. You can't kick back your shoes and say, my work on earth is done. I'll take me home, Lord. Like, you still got work with your grandkids. So, well, thank you guys for joining us for episode 4 of this podcast, and we hope that we'll see you in the future.
We'll be around.
Closings. We're not very good at closing on our podcasts yet. We're working on closing.
I thought that was the first thing that people came up with, was what their sign-off was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Not us.
Well,
you close us out.
I'm Zach. That's Calvin. This is Train Up a Podcast. We'll see you next week.